My name is Sophia Bennett, and I'm 35 years old. 3 nights ago, my father rose at our family's most elegant gathering. 50 relatives, crystal champagne flutes, a ballroom that cost more than most people's annual earnings, and announced to everyone that I was being removed from my grandmother's inheritance. "You never earned it," he declared, his voice echoing off marble walls while everyone turned to stare. I simply smiled, raised my glass in acknowledgement, and walked out without a word. 48 hours later, my father lost everything. 18 million in control of his empire, all because of a secret my grandmother took to her grave. Or so he thought. Before I share how one woman's foresight dismantled my family's greed, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me tell you how justice was served. The Bennett family built their fortune in commercial real estate, starting with my grandfather's first apartment building in 1965 and growing into a $550 million empire by the time I was born. Our main estate sprawled across 35 rooms in Massachusetts, complete with staff quarters, a temperature-controlled garage housing my father's collection of vintage Mercedes, and a wine cellar that held bottles worth more than my counselor's salary. Yes, I said counselor's salary. Despite being the eldest Bennett heir, I chose to work as a school counselor at a public middle school in Cambridge. My father, William Bennett, never forgave me for that decision. At every family gathering, he'd gesture toward my younger brother, Marcus, with his Patek Philippe adorned wrist and announce, "Now here's a Bennett who understands legacy." Marcus, 3 years my junior, had stepped seamlessly into his role as vice president of Bennett Holdings at 26. He wore his title like his designer watches, conspicuously and without subtlety. The irony wasn't lost on me that in a family obsessed with building things, I was the only one who helped build people's futures with genuine care. My students' drawings and thank you notes covered my small apartment walls where expensive artwork might have hung. My father called it playing with crayons. My grandmother, Catherine, however, called it something else entirely. True wealth, Sophia. She once told me during one of our weekly visits, her fingers tracing the rim of her Waterford crystal cup, isn't measured in square footage or stock portfolios. Your grandfather knew that. Your father, she'd pause, choosing her words carefully, forgot. What I didn't know then was that grandmother Catherine hadn't just observed the family dynamics. She'd been documenting them, and more importantly, she'd been planning. Catherine Hayes Bennett wasn't just my grandmother. She was the family's quiet foundation. Before marrying my grandfather, she'd served as one of Massachusetts' youngest female judges, retiring from the bench only after Marcus was born. While my father built his empire on grandfather's foundation, Catherine built something else. A personal estate worth $22 million through careful investments and the inheritance from her own family's pharmaceutical patents. Every Sunday for 16 years, I drove to her Newton home, not the family estate, her private residence that she'd maintained separately throughout her marriage. Marcus visited on holidays. My father managed quarterly appearances, usually with contracts requiring her signature. But I came for her stories, her wisdom, and honestly, her company. "You're the only one who sees me, not my checkbook," she said one afternoon, 7 months before she passed. We were sitting in her study, surrounded by law books and framed photos from her judge days. "That's why I need to tell you something." She pulled out a document from her desk drawer, its legal seal visible. "I've made certain arrangements, protections really. This family has an illness, Sophia. The belief that money determines worth. I won't let that illness destroy you." I assumed she meant emotional support. Maybe a modest trust fund to supplement my counselor's salary. I didn't ask for details because I didn't care about her money. I cared about her. "Promise me," she said, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "When the time comes, you'll remember that every word in this will was chosen deliberately. Every clause has a purpose." 4 months later, she was gone. Heart failure in her sleep, peaceful and dignified. The funeral was elaborate, of course. My father gave a speech about legacy and empire. Marcus spoke about continuing the family tradition. I read Mary Oliver's When Death Comes and watched my father's jaw tighten with each verse. 3 months after grandmother's funeral, the family dynamic shifted with the subtlety of a hostile takeover. My father called emergency board meetings in the Bennett Holdings conference room, a $55,000 mahogany table surrounded by leather chairs that cost more than my annual counselor's salary. I wasn't invited naturally. Estate planning, Marcus explained during a rare moment alone at a family dinner. He adjusted his Cartier watch, a nervous tell he'd developed in business school. Dad's restructuring everything before the will reading. Grandmother's $22 million has to go somewhere, and he wants to ensure it strengthens the right positions. The right positions, I repeated, cutting into my duck confit, meaning yours and his. Meaning the people actually contributing to the family legacy. His voice carried our father's practiced condescension. Sophia, you made your choice. You can't counsel middle schoolers and expect equal standing with those of us maintaining the empire. That night, I received an unexpected email from Richard Crawford, my grandmother's personal attorney. The subject line read simply, "Confidential estate matter." The message was brief. "Miss Bennett, your grandmother requested I contact you privately before the formal reading. Please call my office at your earliest convenience. Some matters require discussion." I called the next morning from my office at school, watching my students work on their college applications. "Ms. Bennett," Crawford's voice was carefully neutral. "I've been your grandmother's attorney for 32 years. In that time, I've never seen such careful planning. She anticipated certain scenarios, made provisions. I believe you should be aware of these provisions before the family gathering." "What kind of provisions?" "The kind that activate under specific circumstances. Your grandmother was particularly concerned about what she called public demonstrations of character. I think we should meet before your father schedules the formal reading." The humiliations began subtly, then escalated like a calculated campaign. At the monthly family dinner in my father's private dining room, he orchestrated what I now recognize as a deliberate performance. The entire extended family was present. Aunts, uncles, cousins who worked for various Bennett enterprises. "Let's discuss contributions," my father announced over the Wellington beef. "Marcus just closed the harbor deal. $45 million in new development. Daniel," he nodded to my cousin, "expanded our Boston portfolio by 18%. His gaze finally landed on me. "And Sophia counseled, what was it? Troubled teenagers? Helped students navigate college applications and career planning. Actually, my students have a 95% graduation rate. How much revenue did that generate for Bennett Holdings?" He didn't wait for an answer. "This is why the inheritance structure needs to reflect actual value. Those who build the empire deserve to inherit it. Those who choose," he waved dismissively toward me, "social service hobbies shouldn't expect equal treatment." The room filled with uncomfortable chuckles and shifting silverware. I maintained eye contact while reaching for my phone beneath the table, activating the recording app. A habit I developed 4 months ago when these dinners became interrogations. "I understand, Father," I said calmly. "You're saying inheritance should reflect a person's value to the family business, not their value as family?" "Exactly." He seemed pleased I'd understood. Finally, some sense. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, cleared her throat. "William, that seems rather harsh." "Business is harsh, Patricia." Sophia chose to waste her potential. "Why should she benefit from Marcus's hard work from mine?" I saved the recording to my cloud storage, labeling it Dinner 6 Value Discussion. It joined 14 others, a digital trail of my father's growing boldness, each one more explicit than the last about his intentions for grandmother's estate. The revelation came by accident. I'd returned to the family estate to retrieve a book I'd left in my old room, one of my grandmother's favorites. The house seemed empty, but as I passed my father's study, I heard Marcus's voice through the mahogany doors. "The announcement needs to be public," he was saying. "Maximum impact. If we do it privately, Sophia might contest." "She won't contest anything after we're through." My father's voice carried a satisfaction that disturbed me. "The family gala next week? 50 guests, all our relatives and key business associates. We'll frame it as the official inheritance announcement, and you're certain the will allows for discretionary distribution?" "Crawford will read what needs to be read. The rest is interpretation. Once I publicly declare Sophia unfit for inheritance, lazy, unfocused, a disappointment to the Bennett name, no one will question when her portion goes to you. Public shame is powerful, Marcus. She'll be too humiliated to fight back. What if she doesn't show up?" "Oh, she'll show. I'll make sure of it. Tell her it's about honoring Catherine's memory. She won't be able to resist." I stood frozen in the hallway, my grandmother's book clutched against my chest. They were planning a public execution of my character. That evening, Crawford's second email arrived. "Miss Bennett, I've reviewed the timeline your grandmother anticipated. It appears certain events are being set in motion. She wanted me to inform you that public demonstrations of character work both ways. The attached video link requires a password. Use your grandmother's favorite poem title, no spaces, all lowercase. I typed, "when death comes," and watched my grandmother's face appear on screen, sitting in Crawford's office with 3 other witnesses visible in frame. If you're watching this, Sophia, then they've shown you exactly who they are. Crawford's office occupied the top floor of a Boston building that predated Bennett Holdings by decades. The morning I visited, 4 days before the gala, he had 2 other senior partners present as witnesses. "Your grandmother recorded this video 7 months ago," Crawford explained, gesturing to a wall-mounted screen. "She insisted on multiple witnesses and notarization. What you're about to see is legally bulletproof." The video resumed with my grandmother adjusting her pearl necklace, the one she wore to court during her biggest cases. I, Catherine Hayes Bennett, being of sound mind and body, hereby establish the following moral character clause as an integral condition of inheritance. Any beneficiary who publicly humiliates, demeans, or attempts to disinherit another family member through social coercion forfeits all rights to my estate. This includes monetary assets, securities, and my 30% stake in Bennett Holdings. She looked directly into the camera. This clause activates when witnessed by 20 or more individuals in a formal setting. The forfeited inheritance transfers immediately to the wronged party. Crawford paused the video. There's more. Detailed provisions, authentication procedures. Your grandmother spent 4 months perfecting this language with our estate law team. She also did something unusual. He handed me a folder. She investigated your father's financial position. He needs her 30% stake to maintain control of Bennett Holdings. Without it, the board can vote him out. He doesn't know about this clause. Your grandmother insisted on standard language in the public will summary. The full conditions are only revealed after activation. She called it allowing people to show their true character. I studied the documents, understanding dawning. So if he publicly humiliates me at the gala, he loses everything. But Sophia, you need 20 witnesses and documentation. I'll be there, but you'll need to ensure it's properly recorded. Don't worry, I said quietly. They're planning quite the show. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom gleamed with calculated opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across 50 guests, each holding champagne flutes filled with Dom Perignon. My father had spared no expense for what he'd billed as a celebration of Catherine Hayes Bennett's legacy. I arrived in a simple black sheath dress, elegant but understated, nothing that screamed money. Marcus, in contrast, wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo that photographers from the society pages were already capturing. He greeted relatives while my father worked the room in his Brioni suit, laying groundwork for what was to come. Sophia. My Aunt Patricia embraced me warmly. I was worried you might not come. Grandmother would have wanted me here, I said, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. The ballroom's layout was perfect for my father's purposes. A raised platform at the front with a microphone, theater-style seating for all guests, and cameras from the family's documentary filmmaker cousin who'd been hired to preserve the moment. I noted the security cameras in the corners, their red lights blinking steadily. Crawford stood near the back, briefcase in hand, appearing to be just another guest. We made brief eye contact. He tapped his phone. Recording. Ladies and gentlemen, my father's voice boomed through the speakers. He'd taken the platform, Marcus beside him. Thank you for joining us to honor my mother's memory and discuss the future of her legacy. The room settled into expectant silence. 50 witnesses I counted, plus security footage, plus Crawford, plus my own phone recording from my clutch. Before we begin, my father continued, his eyes finding me in the crowd. There's something important that needs to be addressed. Something about family responsibility and who truly deserves to carry on the Bennett name. Marcus smiled. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. The trap was set. My father gripped the edges of the podium, his Harvard ring catching the light. Family legacy isn't just about blood. It's about contribution. It's about building upon what previous generations created. His voice carried the authority of countless board meetings. My mother, Catherine, understood this, which is why her estate must go to those who honor that legacy. He paused for effect, and I saw several relatives lean forward. Sophia, he said my name like an indictment. Stand up. I rose slowly, keeping my expression neutral. The room's attention shifted to me like a spotlight. My eldest daughter chose to abandon the family business. While Marcus here, he gestured proudly, became our youngest VP, Sophia decided to counsel troubled teenagers. The derision in his voice was sharp enough to cut glass. She contributes nothing to Bennett Holdings. She generates no revenue. She builds nothing, Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I remained standing, silent. Therefore, my father's voice rose to fill the ballroom. It's been decided that Sophia will receive nothing from Catherine's estate. Not $1. She made her choice to live a small, insignificant life. She never deserved the Bennett inheritance, and she won't receive it. Marcus actually applauded. A few relatives joined uncertainly. Most sat in stunned silence. This is what's best for the family, my father continued. Those who waste their potential shouldn't benefit from those who achieve greatness. Sophia is officially disinherited from... I raised my champagne glass. The gesture stopped him mid-sentence. Thank you, Father, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. Thank you for making this so very public. I took a deliberate sip, set the glass on the nearest table with a crystalline ring, and walked toward the exit. 50 pairs of eyes tracked my movement. Where are you going? Marcus called out. I didn't answer. I simply left. If you've ever been judged by your family for choosing passion over profit, for picking purpose over portfolio, leave a comment below. Your story matters, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the moment when justice arrives in the most unexpected way. I didn't look back as I left the Ritz-Carlton, but I heard the chaos erupting behind me. Voices raised in confusion, my father demanding I return, Marcus's nervous laughter cutting through it all. My phone buzzed with messages before I reached my car. I ignored them all except one. Crawford, perfectly executed. Documentation secured. See you in 48 hours. The ballroom footage would later show what happened after my exit. My father, attempting to salvage his moment, continued his speech about family values and earning inheritance. Marcus took the microphone to thank him for his wisdom and strength. Several relatives left early, visibly uncomfortable. My Aunt Patricia was caught on camera shaking her head in disgust. But the most important witness was the Ritz-Carlton security system, which captured everything in high definition. The gathering of 53 people, my father's complete speech, his exact words, Sophia is officially disinherited, the hotel's event coordinator, per standard procedure, had also recorded the special announcement for their archives. That night, my phone rang incessantly. I turned it off and spent the evening painting. A portrait of my grandmother in her judge's robes, gavel in hand, a slight smile on her lips, the same smile she wore when she'd won a particularly satisfying case. Hours. That's what Crawford had said. 48 hours for my father to bask in his perceived victory, for Marcus to start spending money he didn't yet have, for the family to process what they'd witnessed. I'd learned patience from counseling teenagers. But I'd learned strategy from Catherine Hayes Bennett. The next morning, my father left a voicemail. Your tantrum changes nothing. The lawyers are updating the distribution documents. Accept reality, Sophia, reality. He had no idea what reality was about to become. The family group chat exploded within hours. I watched the messages accumulate without responding. Marcus, can you believe her dramatic exit? So typical. Cousin Daniel, this feels wrong. Aunt Catherine wouldn't have wanted this. Uncle Richard, William, was this really necessary? My father, the decision is final. Sophia made her choices. Aunt Patricia, this was cruel, William. Shameful. My father, business isn't about feelings, Patricia. What they didn't know was that Crawford had already begun the legal machinery. Forms filed with the probate court, notices sent to Bennett Holdings' board of directors, a formal reading scheduled for the next morning at his firm. Marcus called me 19 times. I didn't answer. He finally sent a text, stop being childish. You knew this was coming. At least show some dignity. Dignity? They were about to learn about dignity. That evening, as I sat in my Cambridge apartment grading student essays, Crawford called with an update. Your father's assistant contacted me, he said, demanding to see the full will before tomorrow's reading. I told her that wouldn't be possible. Your grandmother's instructions were explicit. The complete document is only revealed during the formal reading. Is he worried? He's curious why you haven't fought back, why you haven't hired a lawyer or made threats. Your silence is making him nervous. Good, let him wonder. Let him lose sleep, puzzling over my calm exit, my raised glass, my final words to him. The security footage from the Ritz-Carlton had already been duplicated and notarized. 53 witness statements had been collected by Crawford's team, standard procedure for an estate reading. He told the guests who'd called to confirm their attendance. Tomorrow my father would learn what my grandmother had taught me. True power isn't loud. It's patient. It's prepared. And it's absolutely devastating when deployed correctly. Crawford's appearance at the Ritz-Carlton hadn't gone unnoticed. The morning after the gala, my father's assistant had identified him from the security footage he demanded to review. Looking, he claimed, for footage of my disrespectful behavior. Why was Catherine's attorney there? My father confronted Crawford by phone while I listened on speaker in Crawford's office. I attend many social functions, Mr. Bennett. Your mother was a respected figure in Boston society. You were recording. Many people record memorable events. Your own cousin filmed the entire evening. I want to see the will, the complete document. That will happen at tomorrow's formal reading as your mother specified. 2 p.m. sharp. I trust you and Marcus will attend. Of course we'll attend. It's our inheritance. Indeed, Crawford said mildly. It certainly involves inheritance. After the call, Crawford showed me the conference room where the reading would occur. Your grandmother chose this space specifically. Glass walls, completely transparent. She said justice should never hide in shadows. The mahogany table could seat 20. Crawford had already placed name cards for the mandatory attendees: William Bennett, Marcus Bennett, Sophia Bennett, and 3 senior partners as witnesses. Your father requested a private reading, Crawford noted. I informed him that your grandmother's will specified an open session. Any family member who wishes to attend may do so. By that evening, word had spread. Aunt Patricia confirmed she'd be there. So would Uncle Richard, 4 cousins, and surprisingly several board members from Bennett Holdings, who'd heard rumors about estate distributions affecting company ownership. My father sent one final text that night. Whatever you're planning won't work. The announcement was made. It's done. I finally responded with just 3 words. See you tomorrow. Let him interpret that however he wished. In less than 24 hours, he'd understand everything. The morning of the reading, an email arrived from Marcus. The subject line: final chance to accept reality. Sophia, I know you're hurt, but contesting the will won't work. Dad's already consulted 3 firms. Public disinheritance is legally binding when done by the estate executor, which Dad is. Tomorrow, just accept the symbolic dollar or whatever token amount grandmother left you. Don't embarrass yourself further. I forwarded it to Crawford without comment. His response was swift, perfect. Please save all communications. My father, meanwhile, had scheduled a board meeting for that afternoon right after the will reading. The agenda, leaked by a sympathetic secretary: restructuring ownership following estate distribution. He was so confident about receiving my grandmother's 30% stake that he'd already begun planning his expanded empire. I arrived at Crawford's firm an hour early, wearing the same black dress from the gala. Crawford met me in his office with coffee and a final review. Your grandmother's video will play automatically once I read the preliminary distributions, he explained. The moral character clause activates immediately upon verification of the triggering event. We have 53 witness statements, security footage from 3 angles, and your father's own words recorded by multiple sources. What about legal challenges? Your grandmother retained 3 separate firms to review this clause. It's been tested against every possible challenge. The language is ironclad. Publicly humiliating a family member with intent to coerce forfeiture of inheritance results in automatic disqualification. Through the glass walls, I watched my father and Marcus arrive. He wore his power suit, the same one from hostile takeover meetings. Marcus clutched his phone, already making calls to celebrate his anticipated millions. They entered Crawford's office like conquering heroes, ready to claim their spoils. They had no idea they were walking into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. 7 months before her passing, my grandmother had summoned me to her Newton home for what she called an important conversation. I found her in the garden, her favorite place for serious discussions, surrounded by the roses she'd cultivated for 45 years. I've been watching your father, she said without preamble. The way he treats you, the way he's teaching Marcus to treat you, it's escalating. It doesn't matter, grandmother. I don't need his approval. No, but he needs my shares. She touched a white rose, its petals perfect despite the late season. 30% of Bennett Holdings. Without them, he loses majority control. The board could vote him out. You're not going to leave them to him. That depends entirely on his character. She turned to face me fully. Sophia, I've spent months with Crawford crafting something special. A mirror, you might say. Whatever treatment someone gives, they'll receive in return. She explained the clause. Then how public humiliation would trigger forfeiture, how the assets would transfer to the wronged party, how everything had to be witnessed and documented. But why not just change the will directly? Because people deserve the chance to choose who they are. Your father can choose to be fair, to be kind, to honor family bonds over financial gain. Or, she smiled, that judge's smile, he can reveal his true nature to everyone. You're testing him. I'm protecting you. There's a difference. She handed me a sealed envelope. Crawford has everything, but this is for you. Don't open it until after. It explains why I did this. 4 months later, she was gone. The envelope sat in my apartment safe, still sealed, waiting for after. After was almost here. The moment of truth is approaching. If you're wondering how a grandmother's foresight could destroy an empire built on greed, leave your prediction in the comments below. And if this story of justice resonates with you, a simple like helps others discover that standing up to family bullies is possible with the right preparation. The moral character clause was a masterpiece of legal engineering. Crawford revealed its details to me that morning before the others arrived, showing me the documentation that would soon shatter my father's world. Your grandmother worked with 3 firms, he explained, displaying the papers: estate law, corporate law, and contract specialists. Every word was chosen precisely. Look here. Public humiliation is defined as negative statements about a beneficiary's character, worth, or deservingness made before 20 or more witnesses. Intent to coerce includes attempting to shame someone into declining their inheritance. The documentation was overwhelming. 3 independent law firms' letters confirming the clause's validity, recordings of my grandmother stating her intent with witnesses present, notarized affidavits from the drafting attorneys. But this is the crucial part. Crawford pointed to a subsection. The clause is hidden in the standard will summary, completely legal under Massachusetts law. Full disclosure only occurs after a triggering event. Your grandmother called it a character reveal provision, and the Bennett Holdings shares? 30% worth approximately $165 million at current valuation, but more importantly, they represent the controlling interest when combined with independent board members' votes. Your father needs them to remain CEO. The shares had been my grandmother's ultimate leverage, inherited from my grandfather with the explicit right to distribute them as she chose. My father had assumed they'd naturally flow to him, the sitting CEO. He'd never imagined my grandmother would weaponize them. One more thing, Crawford added. The clause includes a specific provision. Attempted legal challenges result in additional penalties. Your grandmother thought of everything. Through the glass walls, I saw more family members arriving. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Richard, several cousins. Word had spread that something significant was happening. My father noticed them too. His confident expression flickered with the first hint of uncertainty. Over the past 48 hours, I'd assembled everything with the precision my grandmother taught me. The Ritz-Carlton security footage, 3 angles, time-stamped, showing all 53 attendees. The audio recording from my phone, crystal clear, every word of my father's speech preserved. The witness list Crawford's team had compiled, including contact information and preliminary statements. But I'd gone further. 4 months of recorded family dinners where my father had systematically belittled my career. Emails between him and Marcus planning the public disinheritance. Text messages where they discussed teaching Sophia her place. You documented everything, Crawford observed, reviewing my files that morning. Grandmother told me to 7 months ago. She said, start recording not for revenge, but for protection. Truth needs evidence. The most damaging piece was a video I'd taken of my father practicing his Gala speech in his study. He hadn't known I was in the hallway recording through the cracked door as he rehearsed lines like, Sophia contributes nothing, and she never deserved the Bennett name. Crawford added these to the official file. Your grandmother would be proud. You've built an airtight case. I learned from the best. She always said, never go to court with feelings. Go with facts. Now, sitting in that conference room as 2 hours approached, I watched my father check his Rolex repeatedly. Marcus scrolled through his phone, occasionally showing him something that made him nod approvingly. Property listings probably, or yacht catalogs. The other family members settled into their seats quietly. The board members from Bennett Holdings clustered together, whispering about regulatory implications. Crawford stood at the head of the table, a remote control in one hand and a leather folder in the other. Shall we begin? He asked. My father straightened his tie. Finally. Crawford's conference room felt like a tribunal. The glass walls meant everyone in the firm could witness what was about to unfold. My grandmother's final touch of transparency. Family members had shown up along with 3 Bennett Holdings board members who'd heard whispers about estate shares. "Thank you all for coming," Crawford began, his voice carrying the gravity of 3 decades of practice. "We're here for the formal reading of Catherine Hayes Bennett's last will and testament." My father sat at the center of the table like a CEO at his board meeting. Marcus to his right. I deliberately chose a seat at the far end, wanting to watch their faces when the truth emerged. "Before we begin," Crawford continued, "I must note that Mrs. Bennett requested this reading be video recorded for legal documentation. Are there any objections?" "Get on with it," my father said impatiently. Crawford activated the recording system, 3 cameras capturing every angle. Then he opened the leather folder. The preliminary distributions are as follows. To various charities, Mrs. Bennett leaves $6 million. To household staff who served more than 10 years, individual bequests totaling $1.2 million. Marcus was already calculating what remained. I saw him tap numbers into his phone calculator. To my son, William Bennett, and my grandsons, Marcus and Sophia Bennett, I leave the remainder of my estate, including my 30% stake in Bennett Holdings, to be distributed according to the conditions set forth in the full documentation. Finally, my father muttered. "However," Crawford said, and the room stilled. "Before distribution can occur, we must review the complete conditional provisions, including all qualifying clauses." He picked up the remote. Mrs. Bennett recorded a video explanation to ensure her intentions were absolutely clear. The wall-mounted screen flickered to life, and my grandmother appeared in stunning clarity, sitting in this very room 7 months ago. She wore her pearl necklace and the navy suit she'd favored for court appearances. Every inch the former judge. "My dear family," she began, her voice strong and clear. "If you're watching this, then I am gone and you're gathered to divide what I've left behind. But first, you must understand why I've structured my will as I have." My father shifted impatiently. Marcus had stopped scrolling through his phone. "I spent 40 years on the bench witnessing how money corrupts family bonds. I watched children destroy each other over inheritance, saw greed transform love into litigation. I refuse to let my legacy become another cautionary tale." She paused, looking directly into the camera with those penetrating eyes that had made attorneys tremble. "Therefore, I have included in my will what I call a moral character clause. It's quite simple. Any beneficiary who publicly humiliates, demeans, or attempts to disinherit another family member forfeits all claims to my estate. This forfeiture is automatic and irreversible upon documented proof of such behavior witnessed by 20 or more individuals." The color drained from my father's face. "This clause exists because I believe inheritance should go to those who value family over fortune, who treat each other with respect regardless of career choices or lifestyle differences. Those who use public shame as a weapon against their own blood deserve nothing from me." Marcus's hand had frozen over his phone. "What is this?" "Furthermore," my grandmother continued, "any forfeited inheritance transfers immediately to the wronged party. This is not about punishment. It's about protecting those who cannot protect themselves from family members who would use wealth as a weapon." "Turn it off," my father commanded. "I'm afraid I cannot," Crawford said mildly. "Your mother's instructions were quite specific. This is entrapment." My father shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. "She can't retroactively punish me for something that happened after her passing." Crawford remained calm. "Mr. Bennett, the clause was part of the will executed 7 months ago. You chose your actions 3 nights ago with full free will. I didn't know about this clause. Ignorance of the full terms doesn't invalidate them. You knew there was a will. You chose to publicly disinherit your daughter before the reading." The screen continued with my grandmother's voice. "To be perfectly clear, I had this clause reviewed by 3 independent firms. It is legally binding and bulletproof." Crawford opened a second folder, which brings us to the events of 3 nights ago at the Ritz-Carlton. He pulled out printed screenshots from the security footage. "Mr. Bennett, before 53 witnesses, you stated, and I quote, 'Sophia will receive nothing from Catherine's estate. Not $1. She never deserved the Bennett inheritance. That was about my inheritance decisions, not mother's.' You specifically referenced Catherine's estate, sir." "We have multiple recordings." Crawford played the audio from my phone, my father's voice filling the room. "Therefore, it's been decided that Sophia will receive nothing from Catherine's estate. The board members were whispering frantically. One was already on his phone, likely calling legal counsel. This is ridiculous. Marcus stood now too. Sophia manipulated this somehow. How? I spoke for the first time. By letting father reveal exactly who he is. Crawford pulled out more documents. 53 witness statements confirming the public humiliation. Security footage from 3 angles. Mr. Bennett, you have triggered the moral character clause. Your inheritance is forfeit. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't do this. It's already done, Crawford said simply. Crawford methodically laid out the numbers with the precision of a surgeon. Due to the triggered moral character clause, the following transfers are now in effect. Robert William Bennett forfeits $18 million in cash and securities. These transfer to Sophia Bennett. My father gripped the table edge, his knuckles white. Marcus Bennett as co-conspirator in the public humiliation. We have emails and recordings of your planning sessions. Forfeits $6 million. This also transfers to Sophia. Co-conspirator? Marcus protested. I didn't even speak at the gala, you applauded. You participated in planning. You sent messages calling it teaching Sophia her place. All documented. Crawford turned to the final page. Most significantly, Catherine Bennett's 30% stake in Bennett Holdings, valued at approximately $165 million, transfers from William Bennett to Sophia Bennett. Effective immediately, the board members were on their feet. One of them, Harold Brennan, spoke first. 30%? William, you only hold 35% yourself. This means Sophia becomes the largest shareholder, Crawford confirmed. With 30% versus Mr. Bennett's 35%, combined with independent board votes, she has effective control. This is theft, my father roared. This is consequence, Crawford replied. Your mother anticipated that someone who would publicly humiliate family for money would do the same to business partners, employees, anyone they deemed lesser. She refused to let her shares enable that behavior. I stood slowly, meeting my father's furious gaze. You were right about one thing, father. Inheritance should go to those who contribute value. But you forgot that helping young people find their path, navigate challenges, build their futures, that has value too. More value than destroying your own daughter for sport. You planned this, Marcus accused. No, grandmother planned this. I just refused to beg for your approval. The conference room erupted into chaos. Marcus was shouting about lawsuits while typing frantically on his phone, likely searching for estate lawyers. My father had turned his fury on Crawford, threatening everything from disbarment to criminal charges. You conspired with her? He pointed at me. This whole thing was a setup. A setup requires deception, Crawford said calmly. You chose to publicly humiliate your daughter. No one forced those words from your mouth. Harold Brennan, the lead board member, was already making calls. Emergency board meeting tonight. Yes, all members. The ownership structure has changed. My father spun toward him. Harold, you can't be serious. Robert, you've lost your controlling interest. The board has concerns about your judgment. Publicly attacking your own daughter, what else are you capable of? She's not qualified to hold those shares. She's a counselor. She's the legal owner, Brennan replied. And frankly, after this display, I question your qualifications more than hers. Aunt Patricia, who'd been silent until now, stood up. You brought this on yourself, William. We all watched you mistreat Sophia for years over her career choice. Catherine saw it too. You're taking her side? There are no sides. There's just consequence. Patricia turned to me. Your grandmother would be so proud. Crawford began gathering documents. Ms. Sophia Bennett will need to schedule a meeting to discuss your new holdings. The share transfer will be filed with the SEC by end of business today. Marcus grabbed his father's arm. Do something. What would you like him to do? Crawford asked mildly. The will is ironclad. 3 firms verified it. Any legal challenge triggers additional penalties, specifically litigation costs paid from remaining personal assets. My father's phone buzzed. Then again and again. News traveled fast in their circles. As the chaos swirled around me, I pulled out the sealed envelope my grandmother had given me 7 months ago. My hands were steady as I opened it, though my heart raced. Inside was a handwritten letter in her elegant script. My dearest Sophia, I read aloud, and the room gradually quieted. If you're reading this, then they've shown you who they truly are, and justice has been served. Even Marcus stopped typing to listen. I want you to know this was never about money. It was about protecting the only grandchild who loved me for myself, not my bank account. You visited me every Sunday, not to secure your inheritance, but to hear my stories, share your students' achievements, and bring light into an old woman's life. My voice caught slightly, but I continued. Your father values only what generates profit. He's forgotten that the Bennett fortune was built by your grandfather, who started with nothing but determination and integrity. You have both those qualities, plus something more: compassion. My father sank into his chair, suddenly looking older. I'm leaving you the power not for revenge, but for restoration. Use the shares wisely. The money, I know you'll do good with it. You always have. The foundation you've dreamed of creating for underprivileged students, now you can build it. I looked up at my family. That's what I'm doing with the $24 million, creating the Catherine Hayes Bennett Foundation for Student Support Services. You're giving it away? Marcus gasped. I'm investing it in future leaders. The shares in Bennett Holdings, I'll keep those to ensure the company maintains ethical practices. I met my father's eyes. Something you forgot long ago. You can't run a company. No, but I can vote for board members who can. Starting with the motion to replace you as CEO. Within 4 hours, the emergency board meeting had convened. I attended via Crawford's conference room video link, my newly transferred shares making my presence mandatory. My father sat at headquarters, his usual seat at the head of the table now looking more like a defendant's chair. Harold Brennan called the motion. Given recent events demonstrating severe lack of judgment and potential liability issues, I moved to remove William Bennett as CEO of Bennett Holdings. You need cause, my father protested, publicly attacking a major shareholder, your own daughter, at a company-associated social event attended by investors and partners. That's cause. The damage to our reputation alone. The vote was swift. With my 30% and the independent board members' combined 25%, my father's 35% couldn't save him. Marcus's 10% from his own trust was useless without voting rights until he turned 30. Effective immediately, Brennan announced. William Bennett is removed as CEO. The board will appoint an interim CEO while we search for a permanent replacement, but the dominoes kept falling. That evening, 3 major investors pulled out of Bennett Holdings' latest development project, citing concerns about leadership stability and corporate culture. The company's stock price dropped 14% in after-hours trading. Marcus's situation unraveled just as quickly. Without my father as CEO, his VP position became untenable. The interim CEO, brought in from outside, began a full audit of executive positions. His lack of actual qualifications, he'd been promoted based on nepotism alone, became glaringly obvious. Within a week, he was quietly transferred to a junior analyst position. The designer watches and luxury cars suddenly seemed like artifacts from another life. My father tried to leverage his remaining 35% to regain power but found himself isolated. His reputation in Boston's business community was destroyed. I stood to leave Crawford's conference room as my father and Marcus remained seated, seemingly unable to move. The other family members had already filed out, most avoiding eye contact with them. This isn't over, my father said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. Yes, it is. I paused at the door. You spent my entire life telling me I was worthless because I chose counseling over corporate profits. You made every family gathering a trial where I had to defend my existence. That's over. We're still family, Marcus said weakly. Family doesn't publicly humiliate each other for entertainment. Family doesn't plan someone's disgrace over champagne and laugh about it. So you're just walking away? My father's question held a note of something I'd never heard before. Fear. I'm establishing boundaries. My door remains open if you ever learn to respect others for who they are, not what they earn. But I won't hold my breath, Crawford interjected. Ms. Bennett, shall I proceed with the SEC filing? Immediately, I looked back one last time. You know what grandmother told me? She said the saddest thing about you, father, wasn't your greed. It was that you had a daughter who would have loved you unconditionally, but you threw that away because she didn't fit your business plan. I walked out, my heels clicking on the marble floor with the same measured pace I'd used leaving the Ritz-Carlton. Behind me, I heard Marcus asking Crawford about appeals, about loopholes, about anything that might undo what had just happened. His response was simple. Your grandmother was a judge for 20 years. She knew how to make things permanent. The elevator doors closed on that chapter of my life. 7 months later, I stood in the center that had once been an abandoned community building in Cambridge. Sunlight streamed through the restored windows, illuminating resource materials for 120 students. The Catherine Hayes Bennett Foundation for Student Support. Services had just held its first graduation ceremony, and students had received full scholarships and comprehensive support services in our first year. Kids who reminded me of my own students, talented, driven, but told they were impractical dreamers. Their parents stood among the crowd, some crying as they saw their children receive awards and college acceptance letters. "Ms. Bennett?" A reporter from the Boston Globe approached. "Any comment on your father's recent bankruptcy filing?" I'd heard, of course. After losing the CEO position, he tried to start his own firm using his remaining wealth. But his reputation preceded him. No one wanted to partner with someone who'd publicly betrayed his own daughter. His 35% of Bennett holdings, now worth less due to the stock decline he'd triggered, wasn't enough to sustain his lifestyle. "I wish him well," I said simply. Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. Marcus had reached out once, 4 months ago, a tentative email asking if we could talk. I'd responded that I was willing to listen when he was ready to apologize, genuinely, not strategically. I hadn't heard back. The 30% of shares I'd retained gave me just enough voting power to block any hostile takeovers. Bennett Holdings, under new leadership, had pivoted toward sustainable development and community partnerships. The stock had recovered and surpassed its previous value. Aunt Patricia approached with a glass of sparkling cider. Catherine would have loved this. I touched the pearl necklace I wore, grandmother's, left to me separately from the contested estate. She's here in every scholarship, every student who now believes their dreams matter. That night, after the center had emptied and the last student had thanked me with tears in their eyes, I stood alone in my office. On the wall hung my grandmother's portrait, the one I'd painted the night of the gala, her in judge's robes with that knowing smile. The letter she'd left me ended with words I hadn't shared with anyone. "Sophia, they will call you calculating. They will say you manipulated an old woman's love. Let them. You and I know the truth, that you would have walked away from every penny if it meant having one more Sunday visit with me. That's precisely why you deserved it all." My phone buzzed. An unknown number, but I recognized the area code. My father's neighborhood, Sophia. His voice was different, smaller. "I wanted you to know I saw the foundation coverage. The kids you're helping?" I waited. "Your grandmother was right about everything. About me, about what real value looks like." A pause. "I'm sorry. Not because I lost everything. Because I lost you. Because I made you feel worthless when you were the only one in the family actually creating something meaningful. Thank you for saying that. Could we maybe, sometime, I said. When you're ready to see me as Sophia, not as a disappointment. When you can be proud that your daughter helps students, not in spite of it, but because of it. I'm working on it. Maybe he was. Maybe people could change when they lost everything they thought mattered and realized what actually did. Family isn't about blood or money. It's about respect, genuine love, and the courage to protect yourself from those who would diminish your light. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't wealth. It's the wisdom to know your worth and the strength to demand others see it too. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been told your dreams weren't practical, your choices weren't valuable, or your worth was measured in dollars instead of heart, please share your own experience in the comments below. We all have stories of finding our worth despite those who tried to diminish it. Consider subscribing if you believe in justice served with dignity, boundaries maintained with grace, and the power of patient wisdom. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their value isn't determined by their bank account or someone else's approval. And remember, you are worthy. You always were.